Hello, all good people! In today's video, I introduce you to a recipe that I use almost every day for making whole grains. And it saves not only time, not only less need to wash dishes, but also saves electrical energy. Plus it's so useful that I just feel compelled to share it with you. And one patient taught me this method of cooking, for which many thanks to him. The fact is that maybe many of you know this method, but for me it was just a surprise. I tried to cook whole grains in a thermos, and it turned out that it is so convenient and necessary thing that now I use it every day. All you need for this is just wide-mouth thermos. It's preferable that it be about 750 milliliters in capacity. It's even better if it's made of steel, because then it will serve longer for you and you can cook any cereal in this way. Now I'll show the whole cooking process. Then we will discuss what's useful there, why it is necessary at least once a day. My recommendation to every person is to use this dish, because if you do at least one meal in this way, then you are almost guaranteed to drop bad cholesterol levels, improve good cholesterol levels, drop blood sugar levels, and improve many health indicators. For cooking, we need boiling water, we need a thermos with a wide mouth, we need about 3/4 of this cup of whole grain oatmeal, but chopped, flattened, and whatever you like will do. And then we'll need extra virgin olive oil. We need walnuts, you can use almonds, you can use hazelnuts, and definitely pumpkin seeds. And then it's a matter of technology. We put the cereal in the thermos, then take the kettle. It's hard to see through the camera, need to get used to it. Pour into a thermos, the capacity of which is 750 milliliters. Therefore, it was experimentally established that just such an amount of water and such an amount of oatmeal will give the desired consistency. That's it. After that, we twist the lid. This recipe is best obtained if all its contents are infused in the thermos for more than 8 hours. Let's open it up and see what happens. So I opened it, it looks like this. Almost nothing comes out, I need to get a spoon. Here, as you can see, you'll never achieve such a consistency if you cook in the usual way, so that all the water is absorbed and the porridge becomes so crumbly. By the way, it's already more than 8 hours and the heat has been preserved. That is, when I unscrewed the lid, steam really came out of here, and by the way, there was still some porridge left in the thermos. That is, it's not a full portion. It remains only to add olive oil here. I usually add 2 tablespoons of olive oil and a pre-measured mixture of nuts and pumpkin seeds. This is what happened. Here you can add spices to taste, whatever you want. You could add them, by the way, immediately here in the thermos before closing the lid, and thus the taste could be improved. The preparation itself took, you see, almost nothing. To check what we are getting in terms of nutrients in this dish, I turned to myfooddata.com. This is an online calculator that gives a very detailed idea of what is contained either in a single product or in a whole dish, or even in a whole daily diet. In turn, for this online calculator, the data is taken from the database of the USDA, and we got that the number of calories is 1183 kilocalories. This is a pretty high calorie dish. Total fat is 68.6, but saturated fat is only 10.2 grams. Do you know what saturated and unsaturated fats are? Saturated fats can be harmful if consumed in excess, and excess is when you get more than 5 to 10% of your daily calorie intake. Let's say you spend 2,500 kilocalories per day. Accordingly, you shouldn't get more than 10% of those calories from saturated fat. That is, no more than 250 kilocalories, or roughly speaking, no more than 25 grams of saturated fat can be eaten. And accordingly, we see that in this dish there are only 10 grams of saturated fat. That is, even with a diet of 3000 kilocalories, we will get exactly the amount of saturated fat that doesn't exceed a dangerous value. Saturated fats in excess in the diet can reduce the number of receptors for low-density lipoproteins and increase the level of bad cholesterol in the blood. And accordingly, a sufficient amount of unsaturated fats on the contrary, reduces the amount of bad cholesterol in the blood and increases the amount of good cholesterol. We also see that there are 112 grams of carbohydrates here, but these carbohydrates are not fast. That is, they don't lead to a rapid increase in blood glucose as we take whole grain oatmeal. Either it can be chopped oatmeal or it can be flattened. The only difference will be how quickly the blood glucose level will rise after eating such a dish. Of course, the slowest rate of raising glucose will be if you eat just such whole grains. Next is a very important parameter, downright magnificent. This is dietary fiber, 19.4 grams. Let me remind you that it's recommended to consume 14 grams of dietary fiber for every 1000 kilocalories. Adult men should consume somewhere between 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. Women, about 25 grams of fiber. That is, we see that here, in this one serving, we already have more than half of the required fiber. Let me remind you that fiber is very important for the proper functioning of the intestines, as well as the proper functioning of the microflora. That is, the bacteria that live with us and produce very useful substances. Short-chain fatty acids that affect almost every aspect of our life, from immunity to mood and cognition. In addition, in this dish we see a very large amount of protein, 37.3 grams. Of course, these are vegetable proteins. We will further analyze their composition. How complete are they? For now, we note that this is a very good amount. A person weighing 70 kilograms should consume a minimum of 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Then, 70 grams a person should consume. We see that in this amount of the dish, the amount of protein is 37 grams. That is more than half of what an ordinary person needs. Well, in addition, we see that there is a rather large amount of iron, 12.6 milligrams. Well, it's clear that not everything is absorbed, but nonetheless. Now, let's look at the amino acids composition. As you know, the quality of a protein is determined by the amount of essential amino acids it contains. Essential amino acids, let me remind you that you cannot synthesize in our body, and accordingly, we must receive them with food. These are amino acids such as valine, leucine, isoleucine, methionine, lysine, tryptophan, threonine, phenylalanine, and histidine. See what we have here. Tryptophan. There is already 148% of the required amount for a person whole daily energy expenditure is 2000 kilocalories. Threonine. There is 102%. Isoleucine. 90% of the required amount. Leucine. 86%. There are no data on lysine and methionine. Phenylalanine, 183% of the required. Valine, 92%. Histidine, 106%. That is, you see that a fairly large number of essential amino acids are present in this dish. But what about the composition of fats? The site gives us this data as well. You know, monounsaturated fats are almost 26 grams. Polyunsaturated fats, 20 grams. Omega-3 is almost 3 grams. Omega-6, 17 grams. Let's look at the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. This ratio is 0.17. Omega-6 to omega-3, 5.83. Well, you know the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Some believe it should be 4 or even less. Well, I'd say that these data are still inaccurate. This is just one of the hypotheses. This is not absolute truth, but even if we accept this hypothesis that the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 should be less than 4 in order to reduce the activity of inflammatory processes in the body, then we get 5.83. That is, even from the point of view of the supporters of the theory of this ratio, the figure is no longer so scary. The only feature of this dish, I don't say a disadvantage, because this is really a feature that is inherent in all plants' products. This is an imbalance in essential amino acids. Here, of course, animal proteins is needed. Therefore, in order to make up for the deficiency, you can take cottage cheese, you can take fish, meat, and egg white. I just took fat-free cottage cheese as an example in order to show how you can easily compensate for the lack of some essential amino acids. Let's see what it gives us. It gives us a total of 30 grams of protein. That is, we can add another 30 grams of protein to this oatmeal dish. And let's see how good it is. Let's go through the essential amino acids. Tryptophan and threonine. You see on the right side there are percentages. Let me remind you, for a diet of 2000 kilocalories, 142% tryptophan of the required, threonine 128%, isoleucine also exceeds 100, leucine also exceeds, lysine exceeds, methionine 100%, phenylalanine 178%, valine 111%. That is, in fact, we even exceed all the necessary amino acids by using both oatmeal and cottage cheese. Thus, we get a very useful and fast product, and not necessarily from oatmeal. You can take some other cereals. The bad thing is, of course, oatmeal, which can be not only whole grain, as in my example, but can also be flattened. If only it weren't instant oatmeal, because it's not about health at all. And accordingly, you can combine different types of cereals. I think you won't eat a lot of this dish, so you won't overeat. The large amount of fiber that it contains, primarily beta-glucans, is an excellent way to nourish the intestinal microflora. Fiber also allows you to sequester, that is, to bind both bile acids and cholesterol, which we get with bile, into the lumen of the gastrointestinal tract, and make the process of binding them irreversibly. They will then be removed with feces, and thus neither bile acids nor cholesterol will be absorbed, and thus your blood cholesterol will decrease, and the liver, in response to this, will increase the number of receptors for low-density lipoproteins, because it also needs to synthesize both cholesterol and bile acids from something. And it will cleanse the blood in this way. Therefore, this product is very suitable for those people who have high cholesterol. This dish is also useful for people with impaired intestinal microflora, for those who have constipation, and for those who have some trouble with an increase in sugar, because the normalization of microflora also allows you to reduce blood sugar levels. In general, there are a lot of positive effects. I advise you to try it, and you'll see that it is indeed a very effective remedy. True, it's not necessary to eat all this portion at once. This is just a recipe. If you have a lot, you can share it with someone. Thank you for your attention.